So I'm just going to talk about feedback for a bit here today. With feedback, this is a difficult topic. We're talking about the responsibility of receiving feedback as well as giving feedback. And we really want to sit in a place of being humble, especially if we have positions of power where we need to talk to others. We need to acknowledge our responsibilities, and we also need to set expectations clearly right from the beginning. And just like with anything, feedback is a type of conflict. It means that we might have a different perspective on someone's productivity or behavior that they're doing than their own. So when we enter into conversations or we want to give feedback, we actually want to create dialogue instead of monologuing. We want to get the person without the power in the situation to be um, primary in the way that they're articulating their experience. And then we need to put ourselves, when we have power positions, into a listener mind, a humble mind, so that we can be curious, we can lean into things we agree with, validate perspectives, and then add in questions to pull the conversation towards what is the issue or behavior that needs adjusting or change to be able to be part of the team that we're trying to establish. Now, just we in this week, I do put up the concept of candor and versus honesty, because in the world of business, that word gets used a lot. And when you go to the woman, Kim Scott, who really developed this idea of radical candor to really get into the depth of what she's talking about, she's really talking about conversations where you are going towards the idea of how are we going to fix this problem? How are we going to work together so that we can create a dialogue? And she compares it to this idea of honesty. So honesty is often a thing that is used, as well as candor, in a weaponized way for me to be blunt and direct and almost creating a language weapon. And I justify that by, I'm going to use candor, I'm going to use honesty. And instead of those things where and they're using those words as a label and an excuse for being unkind, not being compassionate, not having to listen to someone else's perspective. And if you are in a supervisor position, if you have someone on your team who is overly sensitive to criticism, that could be me. I can be that person as well. You want to enter those conversations with kindness. You want to remind them of their value. You want to remind them of what they're doing well and how you have maybe felt hesitant of working on ways to pull them into performance, guiding them and guidance on their performance so that they can be the best they can be on their job. And you want that person to enter into the dialogue in a way where they can be the most receptive and give them some power in the conversation. Uh, One of the ways that you can do that is to make sure that it's planned, that if you do have a critique on something that is going on, we want the critique to have a plan to it. We want to give the person a chance to decide when they are ready to receive that feedback. If the person is always putting it off, and avoiding and avoiding and avoiding, then that is a different issue. But let's just say that you want to do a performance review, or this once a week you check in with your team and you say, these are the appointments I have available for your um, check-in for the week. And you have that person choose the time they can do that. You see how you create just a little bit of balance with power and how considerate that can be compared to, uh, can I see you in my office now? I'll be in my office at this time. Please stop by. And creating uh, power imbalances that can amplify someone's emotional reaction to being able to dialogue. Okay, so the other thing is to be sure that whatever criticisms you have are done in private. Those conversations are done uh, in a way that there's formality to it. Uh, there's also when you do have praise that you make praise public, meaning that you will find ways in group meetings to be sure to put emphasis on what's going well. And then you can pull aside for things that might have to go into a critique mode. Now, there is this thing called the Oreo. I want to address the Oreo right away, which is the look of a Oreo cookie where it has the sandwich effect. And they want to say, you put praise and then you do the critique and then you end with praise, which can actually be uh, a good frame to go into a dialogue. However, we do notice that when it can be overused, this kind of sandwich approach to critique, so that you can condition your team or your audience's ear to always, whenever they hear praise, to expect a but. So we don't want that. We want praise to be able to be a standalone and not just used as a way to go into the critique. So thinking about that. The other thing is if you decide to use candor in a workplace, it's good to establish it as a norm. So you need to define what candor is with your team. You need to open up a dialogue about what that would be like, and then have people who don't have power to put in input on norming, how to normize that. Like, for example, like the one I just gave about choosing when to expect a critique feedback. The other thing is that feedback should never be against. So we want to create norms, and that means you need dialogues. That means you need to think about how you're creating collaboration, and that people's different perspectives or different personalities should not be weighing us. How do I want to say that? That people's differences should be enhancing how we establish those norms so that we can have a stronger team in the end. So that's the other thing we want to do. The other thing is we want to look at constructive feedback versus personal criticism. So we want to look at work productivity, or we want to go to the processes of expectations or goals or outcomes that are expected from the people that we work with. And we want, when we're setting those expectations or how we're expecting outcomes or goals, that we get, often supervisors end up in these monologue modes and the other person's like, oh yeah, yes, okay. Yes, and then they sign. But if you do that, you may not know how they've received that feedback, how they are processing it. They might be really good at a poker face and stonewalling to emotionally get through a difficult conversation, and nothing's been absorbed. So you want to find a way to get the other person in that speaking role so that you can hear if they can mirror that, or if they have a suggestion, or what does that sound like to you. And if when you start when a supervisor puts themselves in a listening role, then the differences of the other person and how they've listened to you starts to become clearer. And so we want to create feedback loops, which if you take my organizational communication class, we talk a lot about system theory and feedback loops, but this is just a little thing that we want that feedback loop in there so we can adjust the way we are sending messages so that we know how it's been heard or how do they hear the expectation? How do they hear the goal? Here's an example. Let's say that someone wants to work remotely and you're like, well, that's fine with me. Your job can be done remotely. I'm okay with that. I just need to make sure you're logged in for a certain number of hours a day so that we can have consistency. Okay, now you have defined that you need a certain number of hours that they're logged in. However, the other person might be like hearing something different in that expectation. Oh, great. I only have to do 8 hours. Well, I do my best 8 hours from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I'm going to do my 8 hours on different sets of time than the the people that are coming into the office, the people that are active in the team environment, they keep trying to contact you, and you're not there, and they're like, well, I'm working remotely. I got permission, and I only have to work 8 hours, and these are the hours I choose to do. I do. I get up early. I log in at 4:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then back on at 7 p.m. to this time. And that might be a misalignment because we're not clear on the expectation or the goals that we're looking for and having to not instead of having to go back and ending up in a conflict. Well, you said I could remove, all you said was 8 hours, right? That we want to, that might have, maybe, not always, but it might have been avoided if we entered into a dialogue. What does remote work look like to you? So we can't anticipate every single situation that goes on. That's not possible. Conflict is inevitable. We need to understand that we need to do perception checking. We need to engage in dialogues. And then when we enter into constructive feedback, we're setting and we establish a specific conversation norms. We can avoid moving into places where we are getting targeted about personality or targeted in a way that feels counterproductive or feels like an aggression or an attack on someone's persons. So we need to enter into those dialogues, and we can go back to the perception checking to think about how we are allowing someone else's perspective to be validated, even if we don't always agree with it, even if we feel like that the person isn't really acknowledging our point of view. We need to be able to hear that and hear how how disagreements about perception of a situation, is it going in two directions or is it just one way? So that's something to think about. Okay. So uh what's the next thing I want to talk about with this? So sometimes we have to give feedback on something a little that is might feel a little more personal to someone, or they will, depending on their past experiences, they might be coming at it with, it might end up being a trigger for them, or it may be something like, oh, well, someone else in my past said something similar to me and I never was able to get over it. And then they shut down conversations and they can't seem to pull their mind into the unique moment that they're in. They just will go back to that past event, and everything you do now is going to be compared to that. And that can be also a really detrimental way in that we are listening to feedback. So, one way to do that is, how do you prepare yourself to hear feedback? How are you in a place of self awareness? And how are you experiencing a specific moment to just be about this person and that person? So in communication, we say every communication event is completely unique. It's never happened before. Even if your neural pathway leads you to a past experience, we need to find ways to uh, be kind to ourselves, that that past experience and whatever in whatever ways we were injured or harmed is that particular moment, and then pull ourselves into this moment and really try to make ourselves alert and calm to the actual experience that we're in. And one way to do that is first to acknowledge that you have this injury from your past and that you want to be present for this moment, but you have these barriers or interference that are showing up in psychological and sometimes physiological noise, because our heart rates increase. We sometimes feel uh, like our we feel clammy or sweaty. We might turn red. There's all these physiological reactions that happen in that fight flight flooding experience. And that emotional reaction can immediately pull us into this defensive place of being criticized. And we might then deny it, or we will turn to our biases that, oh, you are this. And anyone who is this, who said that to me, is bad, instead of uh, and we will counterattack. We will deny that the validity of the comment. And that becomes really destructive to trust and caregiving and things like that. And we might be in a situation where we're getting a repeated injury, but we need to sort that out and learn how to regulate our emotions so that we can really, really listen and understand what's happening in the moment. Can we slow down? Can we slow our roll, slow down that moment and really see if we can pay attention to the experience that we're in? That means that takes a lot of prep work, that takes a lot of practice, that needs a lot of self-reflection. Uh, and uh, it, and so if you know you're trying to go into a moment where you're going to need to be actively pulling yourself into the moment, there's ways to do that. You need to practice. You need to practice listening. And it's good if you have someone you can call or you can talk to and say, hey, I have this meeting coming up. I'm concerned they're going to say this. I'm concerned they're going to say this to me. And I want to be able to be fully present to that. And go through the dialogue with someone who wants to dialogue with you, who is compassionate and kind and can help you play out different scenarios. And you almost do that in a way so that you can set it aside and then be fully present to this moment and to the other person. So that kind of acknowledges that you have some painful you might have a painful experience. And then in the moment, you want to set the expectation. You want to be clear about what is the expectation. Let's say there is something you've done wrong and you're getting criticism, or there's some behavior you need to adjust in your workplace and you are getting feedback about that. You want to concentrate on what's being said, uh, and then acknowledge the first thing is to acknowledge any responsibility that you have, right, in that situation. Just acknowledge it. Just say, yes, that is true. I do say that when I'm in this situation, or I do acknowledge that I've come in late to meetings several times in the last quarter, whatever it is. And then you want to, as soon as you acknowledge it, especially if you're talking to someone who maybe doesn't have the skills, you want to set a clear expectation. So let's be clear about what is the expectation, what is the goal, what is the change we're looking for, and be clear about, uh, I would like to set a different time or allow for a period of time and then come back to this and check in with you again. And then drill down, really get curious and ask questions back so that you can create some balance and dialogue and show that you are in a receptive mindset to the feedback and wanting to change behavior. Now, you might feel like the feedback is not correct, that it's not. Let's say you're getting feedback on something that you don't feel is a true critique, or you felt like it's about not something that you can change about your situation, whatever it is. Let's say there's something about it that is you're feeling the defensiveness is that's not true. I think to begin a conversation like that, the first thing you want to do is find anything you can agree with, anything at all. I do acknowledge that there is an issue with A. I do want to talk about B because I feel unsure about how that is part of the dialogue because of X, Y, and Z. Can you tell me more about that? Right. And then if you can get some more clarification with it, you might be able to pull apart the statement to see what can we readjust about our expectations and the perception of others and how we're coming across to others. Because if it is coming up, then we want to say, oh, then the perception of others um, might I might have come across in a way that I didn't mean to come across. And so we want to reset those expectations and find other ways that we can show up. I think these are really difficult situations. It's why I added a lot of voices into our Canvas page and some of the vocabulary, because these situations are so intense sometimes, and there's sensitivity, and people's jobs are on the line. Sometimes people's identities feel attacked, and we want to find ways to create room for who we are in our workplaces, since so much of our work is dependent on our ability to live, right? Or feed our families, and or take care of ourselves in the way that we want to be, and our health. I haven't talked too much about health, but I think our workplaces and our connection to our health, our well-being, and our growth are intertwined, especially in our current societal demands that our workplace kind of is connected to our identities. So these are very, very sensitive situations. I always want you to take care of being safe. I always want you to think about how to be kind and humble and considerate of other people, even when we feel like we are um, not being seen ourselves. And those are really painful places when we don't feel like we are being seen. So let's keep praise in public. Let's think about how we are showing up to develop our workplaces to be places where we can care for others, we can be considerate, and not just fall into these places where we're using each other for our own personal gain. What so I think that's all I have for this. I hope that helps you have a way to dialogue and think about this topic further. It's a very sensitive topic, so I'll be looking forward to your input in your worksheets as they come through to see how you are processing the information. Bye, everyone.